The garden's edge, the observation deck of Station Unity, offered a view that never failed to inspire wonder. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds moved in carefully choreographed patterns through the trade lanes. Ambassador Kiara Chen stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the peaceful ballet of galactic commerce. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a woman in her mid-40s. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her simple grey uniform bearing only the small blue Earth symbol on her collar. Another successful trade agreement. Her aide, Lieutenant James Park, said as he approached with a datapad. The Zarani Collective is pleased with the medical technology exchange. They're calling you the architect of cooperation. Kiara smiled slightly. They're generous with their praise. We simply offered what we could share freely. She turned from the window. Has the Horizon's promise checked in yet? They should be passing through the neutral corridor about now. James consulted his pad. Right on schedule, Ambassador. Captain Rodriguez reports smooth sailing. The families are excited. Apparently the children have been asking when they'll see their new home. The Horizon's promise carried 8,000 colonists to New Terra, a garden world on the frontier of human space. These were farmers, teachers, engineers, and artists. People who wanted to build something beautiful, far from the crowded inner worlds. 300 families had saved for years to afford passage. Kiara had personally reviewed the ship's safety protocols and approved its route through neutral space. Station Unity served as humanity's primary diplomatic outpost. For 2 centuries, Earth had maintained a policy of peaceful expansion and cooperation. Humans had no empire, no conquered worlds, no vassal states. They asked only for enough space to live freely and offered friendship to anyone willing to reciprocate. This approach had earned them respect throughout the galaxy, but respect was not universal. The Vraxian Empire had emerged from the galactic south 50 years ago. They were a warrior culture, 4-armed beings with chitinous armor, and a philosophy that viewed compassion as weakness. They had conquered 17 systems and enslaved 4 species. The Galactic Federation had protested, imposed sanctions, and held countless diplomatic sessions. The Vrexians ignored all of it. Ambassador, James said suddenly, his voice tight, I'm getting reports of weapons fire in the neutral corridor. Multiple sources. It's near the Horizon's promise's projected location. Kiara's stomach dropped. Get me a direct line to their captain. Now James worked frantically at his console. Long seconds passed. Then a minute. Then 5 minutes. The communication channel remained silent. Kiara watched the tactical display as other ships in the area began broadcasting emergency signals. The region of space that had been filled with orderly traffic patterns suddenly erupted into chaos. Ambassador, James whispered, the Horizon's promise has stopped transmitting. All signals ceased 7 minutes ago. Long-range sensors show debris consistent with a large vessel breaking apart. The observation deck seemed to tilt beneath Kiara's feet. 8,000 people, 300 families, children who would never see their new home, teachers who would never educate, artists who would never create, farmers who would never plant. Who? Kiara asked, her voice barely audible. Vraxian attack ships, ma'am. 4 heavy cruisers. They hit the Horizon's promise without warning. Multiple witnesses confirmed they targeted the civilian quarters first. James looked up from his console, his face pale. Ambassador, they made sure there were no survivors. Kiara closed her eyes. She had been a diplomat for 20 years. She had negotiated peace treaties, resolved trade disputes, and built bridges between cultures that had been enemies for centuries. She believed in the power of words, in the possibility of understanding, in the fundamental capacity for beings to choose cooperation over conflict, but she also knew her history. Send an encrypted message to Earth Command, Kiara said quietly. Priority Alpha. Tell them Protocol 7 conditions have been met. James stared at her. Ambassador, that's... Are you certain? They killed 8,000 civilians traveling through neutral space. They targeted non-combatants deliberately. They showed no mercy to families, to children, to people who threatened no one. Kiara opened her eyes and looked at her aide. Yes, Lieutenant. I'm certain. Far across the galaxy, on a world that orbited a yellow star, the message reached Earth Command at 0347 Standard Time. Admiral Takeshi Yamamoto read it 3 times in his office deep beneath the Martian surface. He had hoped to retire without ever seeing these words. He was 62 years old and had spent 40 years in the defense fleet. His service had been entirely peaceful. Training exercises, humanitarian missions, disaster relief operations. He had never fired a weapon in anger. That was about to change. Yamamoto activated his command console and entered his authorization code. Across human space, encrypted signals reached secure facilities that most civilians didn't know existed. Station commanders opened sealed orders. Engineers accessed classified specifications. Captains woke their crews with words that sent chills down every spine. Protocol 7 is active. The transformation began immediately. On Station Unity, Kiara watched as human ships began departing the trade lanes. Medical vessels returning to port. Freighters cancelling deliveries. Explorer ships heading home. Within 6 hours, no human vessel remained in alien space except for those specifically authorized to stay. The alien species noticed. Of course they noticed. Elder Morpheus of the Centauri archives was 900 years old. His species lived for millennia and served as the galaxy's historians and record keepers. He sat in his crystalline chamber, surrounded by data from thousands of years of galactic history, and he felt a familiar dread settling over him. "It's happening again," he said to his assistant, a younger Centauri named Lissa. "The humans are going home." Lissa tilted her head. "Perhaps they're simply being cautious after the attack." "It's a reasonable security measure." "Child," Morpheus said gently, "you weren't alive during the last pruning. You didn't see what happens when humans decide that someone has become a problem that needs solving." He accessed his archives, pulling up records that were carefully maintained but rarely accessed. "Come, let me show you why the elder species fear this moment." The holographic display showed a civilization from 400 years ago. The Celtic Dominion had been powerful, advanced, and aggressive. They had attacked a human medical ship during a plague outbreak, killing the doctors and nurses who had come to help treat dying Celtic children. The humans had given them one chance to surrender. The Celtics had laughed and continued their attacks. 37 days later, the Celtic Dominion no longer existed. Not defeated, not conquered, simply gone. Their 15 worlds were empty space now, uninhabitable due to methods that remained classified in human databases. No refugees, no survivors, no possibility of return. They did this. Lissa asked, her voice small. "They did. And they will do it again." Morpheus closed the display. "The Vraxians have made a terrible mistake. They thought human patience meant human weakness. They're about to learn the difference between being peaceful and being harmless." Across human space, the transformation continued. Dr. Elena Volkov worked in her office at the Institute for Xenopsychology on Luna. She had spent 30 years studying how different species approached conflict. Her alien colleagues had already requested emergency transport home. They knew something she was only beginning to understand. Humans didn't prepare for war the way other species did. There was no panic, no protests, no resistance. People simply shifted from one mode to another with frightening efficiency. The teacher who led her students in morning lessons would be analyzing enemy communication patterns by evening. The engineer who designed irrigation systems would be retrofitting weapons by nightfall. The artist who painted landscapes would be creating psychological warfare materials before dawn. It wasn't that humans enjoyed violence. Dr. Volkov's research showed the opposite. Humans suffered tremendously from conflict. They experienced guilt, trauma, and moral injury at far higher rates than most species, but they had developed a capacity that made them uniquely dangerous. They could separate the necessity of action from the pain of execution. They could do terrible things while fully acknowledging the weight of those actions. Marcus Webb stood in the construction bay of the Jupiter shipyards. He was 53 years old and had designed agricultural equipment his entire career. Tractors, harvesters, irrigation systems. Peaceful machines that helped feed humanity's expanding population. Now he looked at the specifications on his screen and felt something cold settle in his chest. The ship taking shape before him was beautiful in its terrible simplicity. Every line served a purpose, every system optimized for a single goal. It carried no excess, no waste, no unnecessary complexity. It was a tool designed for one job, complete elimination of designated targets. "How long?" asked his supervisor, an older woman named Sarah Chen. Marcus checked his calculations. 14 hours until the first vessel is operational. We can produce 6 more within 3 days. Make it 12 hours, Sarah said quietly. 8,000 people are waiting for justice. Marcus nodded and returned to his work. He would meet the deadline. They all would. Because when you threatened human children, when you targeted families seeking only to build peaceful lives, when you showed no mercy to the innocent, humanity responded with absolute certainty. The Vraxians celebrated their victory for 3 days. Supreme Commander Zrath stood before his warriors, recounting how easily the human ship had been destroyed. He spoke of weakness, of prey species that had grown soft under the Federation's protection. He promised his troops that human colonies would fall just as easily. The galaxy would remember Vraxian strength. On the 4th day, the celebrations stopped. Human ships had disappeared from every trade route, every diplomatic station, every shared facility. The galaxy noticed the absence like missing teeth in a smile. Where commerce had flowed smoothly, there were now gaps. Where human medical teams had provided aid, there was now silence. Where human engineers had maintained systems, there was now growing worry. And in the darkness between stars where no sensors could reach, 30 human ships moved toward Vraxian space with the silent certainty of gardeners approaching an overgrown weed patch. The pruning was about to begin. The pruning begins, Admiral Takeshi. Yamamoto stood on the bridge of the Rising Sun, humanity's newly reactivated flagship. The vessel had been in storage for 70 years, maintained by automated systems, but never expected to fly again. Now it moved through space with 30 other ships that had undergone the same transformation. Civilian exploration vessels had become instruments of precise destruction in less than 12 hours. "All fleet elements report ready, Admiral," said Commander Lisa Torres from her tactical station. She was 38 years old and had spent her entire career managing survey missions. 3 days ago, she had been mapping asteroid fields. Today, she was coordinating an operation that would reshape galactic politics. Yamamoto studied the tactical display showing Vraxian space. 47 star systems, 200 military installations, billions of civilians living their lives unaware of what their leaders had unleashed. The Admiral felt the weight of what was coming, but he also remembered the images from the horizon's promise. Debris fields where families had been, scattered belongings drifting in vacuum. "A child's toy recovered by rescue ships. Begin Operation Gardener," Yamamoto ordered. "Target priority, military installations first. Then infrastructure. Then planets. Give them one chance to surrender at each location. Only one." The human fleet split into 6 groups, each assigned to different sectors of Vraxian space. They moved with coordination that seemed impossible for vessels that had supposedly never worked together. But these crews had trained their entire lives for this moment, even during peacetime. Every navigation exercise had hidden tactical scenarios. Every maintenance drill had prepared them for combat operations. Every peaceful mission had been practiced for the day when peace failed. Supreme Commander Zrath was reviewing expansion plans when the first reports arrived. His command center, deep within the fortified world of Vraxis Prime, suddenly filled with panicked transmissions. Human ships had appeared at 3 military outposts simultaneously. No warnings, no demands, just presence. "How many ships?" Zrath asked his intelligence officer, a younger Vraxian named Krell. 30 total, Supreme Commander. They've split into multiple groups. Our forces outnumber them significantly at each location. This appears to be some kind of demonstration. Perhaps they hope to negotiate. "Humans don't demonstrate," interrupted Zrath's military advisor, an older warrior named Thex who had studied galactic history. "They solve problems. If they're here, it's because they've already decided the outcome." Zrath dismissed Thex's concerns with a gesture. 30 ships against our entire military. This is suicide. Order all forces to engage. We'll teach these peaceful gardeners about real warfare. The first engagement lasted 11 minutes. The human ships at Outpost Verix moved through Vraxian formations like water flowing around rocks. Their weapons fired with precision that seemed impossible. Each shot hit exactly what it was aimed at. No wasted energy. No missed targets. No hesitation. When a Vraxian cruiser exploded, the humans didn't celebrate. They simply moved to the next target. When Vraxian fighters swarmed their positions, the human vessels adjusted their tactics with fluid coordination. It was like watching a single organism with multiple bodies, each part knowing instinctively what the others would to Captain Michelle Rodriguez, commanded the destroyer New Dawn during the assault on Outpost Verix. She had captained the Horizon's Promise's sister ship for 5 years. She knew many of the families who had died. When her weapons officer asked if they should offer surrender terms to the damaged Vraxian command station, Michelle's response was cold and final. They had their chance to choose peace. They chose murder. Continue firing. Dr. Elena Volkov watched the operation from her monitoring station on Luna. She had expected rage, hatred, emotion. What she saw instead disturbed her more deeply. The human military personnel operated with complete emotional detachment. They weren't killing out of anger or revenge. They were solving a problem with the same methodical approach they brought to any task. "It's like watching someone remove a tumor," she said into her research log. "No hatred for the cancer cells. Just recognition that they must be eliminated to preserve the healthy tissue. The most frightening aspect isn't the violence itself. It's the absolute lack of malice behind it." Supreme Commander Zrath watched his strategic display with growing confusion. In 6 hours, he had lost 30 military installations. Each engagement followed the same pattern. Human ships appeared. Vraxian forces engaged. Within minutes, the Vraxian forces ceased to exist. The humans moved to the next target. "They're not taking prisoners," Krell reported, his voice shaking. "They're not occupying territory. They're just erasing everything military they encounter." Zarath activated the communication channel. "Unknown human vessels. This is Supreme Commander Zrath of the Vraxian Empire. We are willing to negotiate terms. We can discuss reparations for the incident with your colony ship. We can establish new treaties. There's no need for further bloodshed." The response came from Admiral Yamamoto himself. His voice carried no anger, no triumph, no emotion at all. "Supreme Commander, you targeted civilian quarters first. You killed families, children, people who posed no threat to you. You had opportunities to choose differently. Now we're solving the problem you created. This communication is your one chance to surrender unconditionally. You have 60 seconds to decide." Zrath felt something he hadn't experienced in his long military career. Genuine fear. "What are your terms?" "Complete disarmament of all Vraxian military forces. Surrender of all government leadership for trial. Immediate release of all enslaved species. You have 40 seconds. That's the complete destruction of our civilization. We're a warrior culture. We can't simply surrender everything we are." "Then you've made your choice." 20 seconds. Zrath looked at his advisors. Thex met his eyes and slowly moved his forearms in the gesture of profound regret. "I tried to warn you, Supreme Commander. Humans don't negotiate once they've decided to act. They offered you mercy once, centuries ago, by establishing rules for peaceful coexistence. You rejected that mercy when you killed their innocents." 10 seconds, Yamamoto's voice continued. 9, 8, wait, Zrath shouted. "We surrender. We accept your terms." There was a pause. Then Yamamoto spoke again. "Your surrender is noted but rejected. You had 60 seconds to accept terms. That time has expired. You chose to negotiate rather than comply. That choice has consequences." The communication ended. Zrath stared at his display as human ships began moving deeper into Vraxian space. Not toward military targets this time. Toward the industrial worlds, the shipyards, so the manufacturing centers, everything that sustained Vraxian civilization. Engineer Marcus Webb watched his ships perform exactly as designed. The vessels moved through Vraxian infrastructure with surgical precision. Power stations ceased functioning. Shipyards stopped producing. Communication networks went silent. But civilian centers remained untouched. The humans were dismantling the Vraxian Empire's ability to wage war while avoiding unnecessary civilian casualties. "It's elegant," Marcus said to his colleague, Sarah Chen, as they monitored the operation. "Terrible but elegant. We're not destroying their civilization. We're removing their capacity for aggression." Sarah nodded. "Like pruning a tree. Cut away the diseased branches so the healthy parts can survive. Assuming we leave any healthy parts." Across the galaxy, the Galactic Federation convened emergency sessions. Representatives from 1,000 worlds argued about intervention, sanctions, diplomatic pressure. Elder Morpheus listened to the debates with tired resignation. He had seen this before. The younger species always thought they could stop it. They never could. "The humans gave the Vraxians clear warnings," Morpheus said when called to speak. For 2 centuries, humanity has maintained galactic peace with one simple rule: don't harm innocents under their protection. The Vraxians ignored that rule. Now they're learning why it existed. But surely there must be some way to negotiate, protested a young delegate from the Talon Confederacy. Entire civilizations can't just be erased. There must be survivors somewhere. You misunderstand, Morpheus replied. The humans aren't fighting a war. Wars have 2 sides competing for victory. What's happening to the Vraxians is problem resolution. The humans identified a threat to innocent life. Now they're removing that threat permanently. By the 10th day, Vraxian space had transformed. Military forces no longer existed. Industrial capacity had been reduced to primitive levels. Communication networks functioned only for local civilian use. The empire that had conquered 17 systems and enslaved 4 species could barely maintain order on its own core worlds. Supreme Commander Zrath sat in his bunker, surrounded by the ruins of his command structure. Reports arrived sporadically, each one worse than the last. His fleets were gone. His armies were scattered. His empire was collapsing, and the humans hadn't occupied a single world. They had simply removed everything that made the Vraxians dangerous. How? He whispered to Thex, who had remained by his side. How did 30 ships destroy everything we built over centuries? Thex looked at his commander with something like pity. Because they weren't fighting us, Supreme Commander. They were solving us. Like gardeners remove weeds, efficiently, completely, without emotion or hesitation. We thought their peace made them weak. We didn't understand that their peace was a choice, not a limitation. Ambassador Kiara Chen received daily reports from Admiral Yamamoto. Each report was brief, factual, devoid of triumph or celebration. Military installations eliminated. Industrial capacity reduced. Surrender offers rejected. The operation continued exactly as Protocol 7 specified. On the 14th day, Kiara sent a message to Earth Command. Request permission to address the Galactic Federation regarding current operations. The response came from Admiral Yamamoto himself. Permission granted, Ambassador. It's time they understood why this was necessary. Kiara prepared her speech carefully. She would need to explain to 1,000 different species why humanity had chosen this path, why peace required the capacity for absolute violence, why patience had limits, why some threats could only be solved one way. As she reviewed her notes, Lieutenant James Park entered her office. Ambassador, I have the final casualty reports from the Horizon's Promise. Every name confirmed, every family documented. There's a 10-year-old girl named Sarah who was traveling with her parents. She wanted to be a teacher. She'll never get that chance now. Kiara closed her eyes. Add her name to my speech notes. All their names. The Federation needs to understand this isn't about strategy or politics. It's about 8,000 people who deserve to live and were murdered for someone's ambition. In Vraxian space, the human fleet continued its work, not with rage or hatred, not with triumph or glory, just with the methodical certainty of gardeners who had found weeds threatening their carefully tended peace. The pruning continued. The problem was being solved. And the galaxy was watching, remembering why the ancient warnings existed. Supreme Commander Zrath would survive. The humans had left him alive deliberately. One survivor to remember. One voice to warn others. One living testament to what happened when someone forgot the simple rule that had kept peace for 2 centuries. Never provoke the humans. The garden restored. The final Vraxian stronghold was Fortress Calyx, a military installation built into an asteroid at the edge of Vraxian space. Supreme Commander Zrath had been transported there when his command center on Vraxis Prime was compromised. Now he sat in a reinforced bunker, surrounded by the last 1,000 warriors of his once mighty empire, and waited for the inevitable. Admiral Yamamoto's fleet approached slowly. Not because they feared resistance, but because the Admiral wanted Zrath to understand exactly what was happening. The fortress's sensors showed 30 human ships moving into position with perfect coordination. No wasted movement, no unnecessary risk. Just efficient execution of a predetermined solution. Supreme Commander, Krell said quietly, our sensors show multiple human vessels positioning around the fortress. They're not attacking. They're just waiting. Zrath understood. The humans were giving him time to think. Time to remember every decision that had led to this moment. Time to feel the weight of 8,000 innocent deaths pressing down on his conscience. If he had one, the communication channel activated. Admiral Yamamoto's face appeared on Zrath's display. The human looked tired, older than his years, but his eyes held absolute certainty. Supreme Commander Zrath, this is your final opportunity. Surrender yourself for trial. Order your remaining forces to stand down. This doesn't have to end with more death. Zrath looked at the warriors surrounding him, young soldiers who had believed in his vision of Vraxian dominance, officers who had followed his orders without question. He had led them to this point. His choices, his ambitions, his belief that human peace meant human weakness. Admiral Yamamoto, Zrath said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. If I surrender, what happens to my people? The civilians on our worlds? They continue living. We have no interest in harming non-combatants. We never did. That was your mistake, Commander. You thought because we could destroy that we would. You confused capability with intention, and if I don't surrender, Yamamoto's expression didn't change, then we complete our work, you die. Your fortress becomes dust, and your species learns its lesson from history books rather than from your testimony. Your choice determines only whether you live to help prevent this from happening again. Zrath felt something break inside him. Not his pride or his honor, something deeper. The fundamental belief structure that had defined his entire life. He had been raised to believe that strength conquered all, that warriors decided the fate of civilizations, that mercy was weakness and compassion was failure. The humans had proven every bit of that wrong. They had shown strength that his empire couldn't match. They had made decisions that reshaped galactic politics, and they had done it all not from hatred or hunger for conquest, but from a simple commitment to protecting innocent life. I surrender, Zrath said quietly. I will stand trial. I will testify to what happened here. Perhaps my shame can serve some purpose. Admiral Yamamoto nodded. Transport coordinates are being transmitted to your fortress. You have 2 hours to prepare your testimony and say goodbye to your warriors. They will be returned to Vraxian civilian authority. You will not see them again. The communication ended. Zrath stood and addressed his remaining soldiers. Our empire is finished, not because we weren't strong enough, because we forgot that strength without wisdom is merely violence. I led you here with my pride and my ambition. Now I'll face the consequences alone. Return to our worlds, protect our civilians, build something better than what I destroyed. As Zrath was transported to the human flagship, Ambassador Kiara Chen prepared to address the Galactic Federation. The vast assembly hall fell silent as she walked to the central podium. Representatives from 1,000 worlds waited to hear how humanity would justify what many species viewed as excessive force. Kiara began with the names. Every single passenger aboard the Horizon's promise. 8,000 names spoken clearly into the record. It took 3 hours. The Federation Assembly sat in complete silence. When she reached the children's names, when she spoke of families torn apart and futures erased, even the most hostile delegates felt the weight of those losses. These were not soldiers, Kiara said when the names were finally complete. These were not warriors or combatants. They were farmers, teachers, engineers, artists, people who wanted only to build peaceful lives on a new world. The Vraxian Empire murdered them deliberately. They targeted civilian quarters first. They showed no mercy. She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. For 2 centuries, humanity has maintained galactic peace with one simple protocol. We offer friendship to all species. We share our knowledge, our art, our resources. We negotiate with patience. We forgive insults. We overlook provocations. But we do not tolerate threats to innocent life under our protection. Elder Morpheus watched from his section, nodding slowly. This speech would be archived, studied, referenced for centuries. Future civilizations would learn from these words why some lines must never be crossed. The Vraxian Empire was given warnings, Kiara continued. Written warnings, diplomatic warnings, historical warnings. They ignored all of them. They chose to test whether human patience meant human weakness. They learned the difference. Humanity is peaceful by choice, not by limitation. We prefer cooperation to conflict. But when forced to choose between mercy for aggressors and safety for innocents, we choose safety. Every time, without exception. She activated a holographic display showing the current state of Vraxian space. The Vraxian military no longer exists. Their capacity to wage aggressive war has been eliminated. Their industrial infrastructure has been reduced to levels sufficient only for civilian needs. But their people still live. Their children still play. Their families still exist because we targeted the disease, not the patient. We removed the threat, not the civilization. Dr. Elena Volkov published her comprehensive study 3 days after the operation concluded. Her paper, titled The Psychology of Protective Violence: Why Humans Fight Differently, became required reading at every diplomatic academy in known space. Humans experience violence as trauma, she wrote in her introduction. They suffer psychological injury from combat at far higher rates than most species, but they have developed a unique capacity. They can separate the necessity of action from the emotional cost of that action. They don't enjoy violence. They accept it as the price of protecting innocence. This makes them the most dangerous peaceful species in the galaxy. Her research documented the immediate psychological aftermath among human military personnel, the counseling sessions, and the memorial services, the quiet processing of what they had been forced to do. Unlike warrior cultures that celebrated victory, humans mourned their necessity for violence, even as they acknowledged its justice. They are gardeners, Volkov concluded. They tend their garden of peace with infinite patience, but they keep sharp tools nearby, and they know exactly how to use them. Engineer Marcus Webb oversaw the decommissioning of the war vessels. The ships that had systematically dismantled the Vraxian Empire returned to their original civilian configurations. Weapons systems were stored in secure facilities. Combat crews returned to their peaceful occupations. Teachers, engineers, artists, farmers, people who had done terrible things and now had to live with those memories. How do you feel? Sarah Chen asked Marcus, as they watched the last war vessel transform back into an exploration ship. Marcus was quiet for a long time, sad, relieved, guilty, certain we did what had to be done and wishing it hadn't been necessary. All of that at once. That's healthy, Sarah said. The day we stop feeling the weight of these actions is the day we become the monsters we're trying to prevent. The Galactic Federation established new protocols following Ambassador Chen's address. The Horizon Protocol formalized what had been implicit for centuries. Any species threatening human-protected civilians would face immediate and absolute consequences. No negotiations, no second chances, no mercy for those who showed none to innocence. More significantly, the protocol extended protection to all species who accepted human guarantee. Smaller civilizations, peaceful worlds, vulnerable populations, they could request human protection and receive it unconditionally. The garden would grow larger, tended by gardeners who had proven their commitment to preserving it. Supreme Commander Zrath lived in a comfortable facility designed for prisoners of conscience. He was not mistreated. His needs were met. His health was maintained. But he would never leave. He spent his days recording testimony, documenting what had happened and why, creating educational materials for species who might consider testing human patience. They're not monsters, he said in one recording that would be watched by billions. That's what makes them so dangerous. They're ordinary people who will do extraordinary things to protect innocence. They don't want to hurt anyone, but they will eliminate any threat to those under their protection without hesitation. Learn from my mistakes. Never provoke the humans. On Earth, in a park in Seoul, a memorial was built to honor the passengers of the Horizon's promise. 8,000 names carved in stone. 8,000 lives that had deserved peaceful futures. Admiral Yamamoto attended the dedication ceremony, standing in his dress uniform with tears running down his weathered face. We did what had to be done, he said to the assembled crowd. But that doesn't make it hurt less. These people shouldn't be names on a memorial. They should be living on New Terra, building the future they dreamed of. We couldn't save them. All we could do was ensure their deaths had meaning, that the galaxy remembered what happens when innocents are targeted. The memorial became a pilgrimage site. Families visited to remember loved ones. Military personnel came to understand the stakes of their training. Alien diplomats were brought there to see what humans valued most. Not territory, not resources, not glory. Just the simple right of innocent people to live without fear. Elder Morpheus updated the galactic archives, with the newest entry in humanity's long history, the Vraxian War. Though it was not truly a war, another civilization learned the ancient lesson. Humanity seeks peace above all things. They will share their knowledge, their friendship, their protection with any species willing to reciprocate, but they will not tolerate threats to innocence. The Vraxian Empire learned this. They still exist, but diminished, their aggression permanently pruned away. He added a note for future historians. Some will view humanity's response as excessive. Those voices come from species who have never had to make the terrible choice between mercy for the guilty and justice for the innocent. Humans make that choice with full awareness of its cost. They do not enjoy violence. They simply refuse to allow evil to triumph through their inaction. Ambassador Kiara Chen returned to her duties at Station Unity, the trade lanes filled with ships again. Diplomatic sessions resumed. Cultural exchanges continued. The galaxy settled back into its peaceful rhythms. But every alien delegate who met with her now saw something new in human representatives. The certain knowledge that behind every patient word and gentle negotiation stood the absolute power to remove threats completely. Lieutenant James Park asked her one evening as they reviewed trade agreements, "Do you think it will happen again? Will someone else forget the warnings?" Kiara looked out at the peaceful traffic patterns. "Probably. In a century or two, maybe longer, there will be a species that thinks human patience is weakness. That mistakes our love of peace for inability to wage war. We'll give them every opportunity to choose differently. And if they don't," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The sleeping giants had awakened, reminded the galaxy why the ancient warnings existed, and returned to their peaceful work. The garden of galactic peace was tended once more, its weeds removed, its flowers protected, and at its edge, quiet gardeners maintained their tools, hoping never to need them again, but ready if that day came. In the furthest reaches of Vraxian space, on a colony world far from the Empire's former core, a young Vraxian child asked her teacher about the monuments being built. "Why do we remember the shame?" the child asked. "Why not forget what happened?" The teacher, an elderly Vraxian who had witnessed the Empire's fall, knelt down to the child's level. "Because memory prevents repetition. We remember so that no future leader will make Supreme Commander Zrath's mistake. We remember so that no species will ever again provoke the humans. They are gardeners, child, gentle and patient, but they have very sharp pruning shears." The galaxy listened, the galaxy remembered, and the galaxy was peaceful, for now. If you're ready to see humanity's revenge unfold, hit that like button. Comment below and tell us, how do you think humanity will bring down those who provoked them? Make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. In this epic HFY saga, humanity's wrath has only just begun, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Comment for next part.